The prison transport moved slowly through the dark space between stars. It was a large ship, ugly and gray, built not for beauty, but for carrying slaves. Inside its metal walls, hundreds of prisoners sat in cold cells, waiting for whatever terrible fate would come next. Among these prisoners was a human man. His name was Daniel Price. He sat alone in a small cell, his hands locked in energy chains that glowed faint blue. His flight suit was torn and dirty. His face was thin from weeks of bad food and no sleep. But his eyes, gray and cold like winter storms, never stopped watching. The guards walked past his cell many times each day. They were Valkyrie, a race of tall insect-like creatures with hard shells and many eyes. They found Daniel amusing. To them, he was nothing more than a strange animal from a small planet they had never heard of before. "Look at the soft creature," one guard said to another, clicking his sharp mouth parts together in laughter. "No claws, no shell, no venom. How did such a weak species survive on their world?" "They probably hide in holes and eat plants," the other guard replied. "The slavers will get nothing for this one. Too weak for labor, too ugly for display." Daniel heard every word. He understood their language now, after 3 weeks of listening. But he said nothing. He simply watched and waited. What the Valkyrie did not know, what they could never have guessed, was that Daniel Price was not an ordinary human. He was an admiral in the United Earth Defense Force. He had commanded the human flagship during the Battle of Proxima, where 3 small human ships had fought against an entire enemy fleet for 18 hours without stopping. He had won that battle. He had won many battles. He had been captured during a peace mission. His small shuttle was supposed to meet with neutral traders at a space station far from Earth. But the Valkyrie had been waiting. They destroyed his escort ships and took him prisoner before anyone could send for help. Now he sat in this cell, counting the guards, learning their patterns, memorizing every detail of the ship. And deep inside his chest, buried under his skin where no scanner could find it, a tiny device sent out a silent signal. This signal was very special. It told any human ship within range that an admiral was in danger and needed rescue. The transport commander was named Velthax. He was larger than the other Valkyrie, with a shell that had turned dark purple with age. He considered himself very clever. When he learned that one of his prisoners was human, he decided to have some fun. He ordered his guards to bring Daniel to the main holding area. This was a big room where all the prisoners could see each other through the bars of their cages. There were aliens of many kinds here. Some had fur. Some had scales. Some had no shape at all and moved like colored smoke. All of them had been taken from their homes to be sold as slaves. The guards threw Daniel onto the floor in the center of the room. He landed hard on his knees but made no sound of pain. Velthax stood over him, enjoying the moment. "Look at this creature," he announced to all the prisoners. "This is a human. They come from a tiny blue world at the edge of the galaxy. They have no great ships. They have no powerful weapons. They thought they could explore our space without asking permission." He kicked Daniel in the side. Daniel fell but quickly pushed himself back to his knees. "This is what happens to those who enter Valkyrie territory," Velthax continued. "You become property. You become nothing. Remember this, all of you. There is no rescue coming. There is no hope. You belong to the Dominion now." Daniel raised his head and looked at Velthax. For just a moment, something passed through his gray eyes. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something else, something that made Velthax feel strange. But the feeling passed, and the commander laughed it away. "Take him back to his cell," Velthax ordered. "We will reach Velka Prime in 2 days. The markets will pay well for such a rare creature." The guards dragged Daniel back to his cell and threw him inside. The energy chains on his wrists grew tighter, burning his skin. He did not cry out. Alone again, Daniel moved to the small window in his cell. It was barely bigger than his hand, but through it, he could see the stars. He watched them carefully, looking for any change in their positions. He did not have to wait long. At first, it was nothing. Just a small area of space that seemed darker than the rest. The stars behind it looked blurry, like looking through dirty glass. Any normal person would not have noticed. But Daniel was not a normal person. He knew what that blur meant. Something very large was hiding in that dark space. Something that did not want to be seen. The pulse in his chest changed. For 3 weeks, it had been sending out a simple distress call. Now it became something more. It was like a handshake between old friends. The thing in the darkness had heard him. It had found him. And now it was coming. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. It was the first time he had smiled since his capture. The guards did not notice the blur in space. The sensors on the transport did not detect anything unusual. The Valkyrie went about their business, laughing and talking about the money they would make selling their prisoners. They had no idea what was coming. In his cell, Daniel sat down against the cold wall and closed his eyes. He thought about Earth. He thought about the green forests and blue oceans of his home world. He thought about the people he had sworn to protect. The Valkyrie thought humans were weak because they had soft skin and no natural weapons. They did not understand that human strength came from somewhere else. It came from their hearts, from their loyalty to each other, from their refusal to ever give up. The Dominion had captured an admiral of the human fleet. They thought this made them powerful. They thought this showed that humans were easy prey. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The darkness in space grew closer. The stars continued to blur. And somewhere in the depths of that shadow, weapons that could crack planets began to wake up. Daniel Price kept his eyes closed and waited. Help was coming. And when it arrived, the Valkyrie would understand what it meant to make enemies of humanity. The waiting was almost over. The sensor officer on the prison transport was young and nervous. He had only been working on ships for 2 years, and he had never seen anything like the readings on his screen. A large area of space, almost 12 kilometers wide, was returning no data at all. It was like a hole had opened up in the universe. "Commander," he called out, his voice shaking slightly. "There is something strange on the sensors." Valfax walked over to look at the screen. His many eyes studied the blank area with little concern. "It is nothing," he said. "The nebula causes problems with our equipment all the time. Ignore it." "But Commander, it is getting closer. And it is very large." Valfax made a sound of annoyance. "I said ignore it. We have a schedule to keep. The slave markets will not wait for us because you are scared of shadows." The young officer wanted to argue, but he knew better. Valfax was not known for his patience. So he turned back to his screen and tried to forget about the strange blank spot that continued to grow larger. In his cell, Daniel felt a vibration run through his body. It was not something he heard with his ears. It was deeper than that, like a sound that his bones could feel. He recognized it immediately. It was the engine signature of a human dreadnought. The signal in his chest changed again. Now it was doing something new, something that surprised even Daniel. It was exchanging codes with the approaching ship, confirming his identity, telling the ship exactly where he was and how to find him. The ship had come for him. After 3 weeks of waiting, after all the pain and hunger and loneliness, rescue was finally here. But Daniel did not celebrate. He knew that the next few hours would be very dangerous. The Valkyrie would not simply let him go. There would be fighting, and people would die. He could only hope that his people were ready. On the bridge of the transport, the lights suddenly went dark. For 3 long seconds, nothing worked. Then the power came back, but something was different. All the screens now showed the same image. A blue circle with green leaves around it, and strange writing underneath. The communications officer tried to clear the image, but nothing he did made any difference. Commander, our systems have been compromised. Someone is sending us a message. Velfax stared at the symbol. He did not recognize it. What does the writing say? The translation computer worked for several seconds before producing an answer. The words that appeared made Velfax feel something he had not felt in many years. He felt afraid. The message read, "This is the United Earthship Constellation. Dreadnought class. Admiral Daniel Price has been identified on your vessel. He is a priority rescue target. All hostile vessels must surrender immediately or they will be destroyed." Dreadnought? Velfax said, his voice barely a whisper. The humans have no dreadnoughts. Our intelligence says they can barely travel between their own planets. Commander, the sensor officer called out, and this time there was real terror in his voice. The blank spot on sensors. It is becoming visible. Velfax turned to look out the main window of the bridge. What he saw made his heart stop beating for a moment. The darkness was peeling away like old skin, revealing what had been hiding underneath. It was a ship, but calling it a ship seemed wrong. It was a mountain of black metal, 12 kilometers long, covered with weapons that Velfax could not even identify. It was bigger than anything the Velkari had ever built. It was bigger than anything Velfax had ever seen. And it was not alone. More shapes appeared around the giant ship. Cruisers emerged from their own hiding fields, their weapons already glowing with power. Smaller frigates darted between the larger ships like hunting animals surrounding their prey. How many ships? Velfax asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. 15. No, 20. Commander, I count 23 warships. They have us completely surrounded. The constellation sent another message. This one was simpler. You have 60 seconds to begin surrender procedures. This is your only warning. Velfax looked at the massive human fleet. He looked at his own small transport ship with its handful of guards and its cargo of helpless prisoners. He thought about everything he knew about humans, about how weak and primitive they were supposed to be. He had been lied to. Someone had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not weak at all. They had been hiding, waiting, building their strength in secret. And now they had come for their admiral with enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Commander, what do we do? One of his officers asked. Velfax did not answer right away. His mind was racing, trying to find some way out of this disaster. Then he remembered something. He still had the human admiral in his cells. Perhaps he could use him as a bargaining piece. Get the human prisoner, he ordered. Bring him to the bridge. Now. Guards ran to follow his command. Velfax watched the human fleet on his screen and counted the seconds. He had less than a minute to figure out how to survive this. On the constellation, Captain Nathan Cole stood at the center of the bridge, watching the prison transport through the main display. He was a tall man with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had served under Admiral Price for many years. When the Admiral was captured, Cole had taken command of the rescue mission personally. "They are not responding to our surrender demand," his communications officer reported. "I did not expect them to," Cole replied. "Prepare boarding teams. We go in the moment the deadline passes." "Sir, they might hurt the Admiral." Cole nodded slowly. "They might try. But Admiral Price can take care of himself. Our job is to give him the support he needs." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their engines and weapons systems. I want that ship dead in space, but not destroyed. There are innocent people on board." "Understood, Captain." The seconds continued to count down. The Constellation's weapons hummed with power, ready to fire at a moment's notice. In the launch bays, Marines in heavy armor checked their weapons and waited for the signal to attack. 60 seconds passed. The prison transport had not. Surrendered. Captain. Cole took a deep breath and gave the order that would begin the rescue of Admiral Daniel Price. All ships weapons free. Take them down. The guns of the human fleet opened fire, and the space around the prison transport lit up like a second sun. The Valkyrie had thought they were hunters. They were about to discover what it felt like to be prey. The prison transport shook violently as the first shots hit its shields. Alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Red emergency lights filled every corridor with bloody color. The Valkyrie crew ran in all directions, some trying to reach their battle stations, others simply looking for somewhere to hide. The human fleet was not trying to destroy the transport. Their shots were precise, targeting specific systems while leaving the main body of the ship intact. First, the weapons went offline. Then the engines died. Within minutes, the prison transport was floating helplessly in space. Unable to fight or run. Daniel felt the ship shake and knew what was happening. His people had come. Now he just needed to stay alive long enough for them to reach him. The door to his cell burst open. 4 Valkyrie guards rushed in, their weapons pointed at his chest. Behind them came Commander Velthax, his compound eyes wild with fear and anger. "Get up, human," Velthax commanded. "You are coming with me." Daniel rose slowly to his feet. The energy chains on his wrists still glowed, but they no longer seemed to bother him. He looked at Velthax with calm gray eyes. "Commander," Daniel said, speaking for the first time in days, "I would recommend that you surrender now. It will go better for you." Velthax made a harsh laughing sound. "You think you can threaten me? I have you in chains. Your ships cannot touch me without killing you." "You do not understand the situation," Daniel replied. His voice was quiet but carried weight, like stones dropping into deep water. "My fleet does not need me to give them orders. They have their own instructions for what to do if I am captured. Those instructions do not include negotiation." Another explosion rocked the ship. Somewhere in the distance, metal screamed as it was torn apart. The guards looked nervous, but Velthax pushed forward and grabbed Daniel by the arm. "Then you will be my shield. They will not shoot if they might hit their precious admiral." "That is your second mistake," Daniel said. "What was my first?" "Thinking that taking me prisoner made you powerful." Daniel's eyes hardened. "It only made you a target." Velthax dragged Daniel out of the cell and through the corridors of the ship. The other guards followed, their weapons ready. They passed cells full of terrified prisoners, aliens from many worlds who watched with wide eyes as the human was pulled along. They reached the main holding area, the same place where Velthax had tried to humiliate Daniel just hours before. Now it was filled with smoke and the sound of distant fighting. The human Marines had breached the ship. "Listen to me," Velthax said, pressing his weapon against Daniel's head. "Tell your soldiers to stop. Tell them to pull back, or I will kill you." Daniel did not show any fear. Instead, he looked around the room at all the prisoners watching from their cells. Then he looked back at Velthax. "These people," Daniel said, nodding toward the prisoners. "All of them. They are now under the protection of humanity. Every single one. They are property of the Valkyrie Dominion." "Not anymore." The sound of gunfire grew closer. Human voices could be heard shouting commands in the corridors. The Valkyrie guards shifted nervously, their weapons moving between Daniel and the doorways. "I am warning you," Velthax said, his voice rising with panic. "I will kill you. I will kill all of them." Daniel turned to face the commander directly. Despite the weapon at his head, despite the chains on his wrists, he somehow seemed to be the one in control. "Let me tell you something about humans," Daniel said. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the smartest. We do not have natural weapons or special powers. But we have something else. We have each other." He took a step forward. Velfax stepped back without thinking. When one of us is in danger, all of us respond. When one of us is taken, all of us come to bring them home. You thought capturing me would show the galaxy that humans are weak. Instead, you showed them what happens when you threaten someone we care about. The wall behind Velfax exploded inward. Chunks of metal flew through the air. Through the hole came human marines in powered armor, their weapons blazing. The Valkyrie guards fired back, but their shots bounced off the human armor like rain off stone. In the confusion, Daniel moved. Despite his chains, despite 3 weeks of captivity, he was faster than anyone expected. He grabbed Velfax's weapon arm and twisted. The commander screamed as his arm bent in a direction it was not meant to go. The weapon fell from his grip. Daniel caught it before it hit the ground. The fighting was over in seconds. The Valkyrie guards were either dead or surrendering, throwing down their weapons and raising their hands. Velfax lay on the floor, holding his broken arm and making sounds of pain. A Marine sergeant approached Daniel and snapped to attention. Her name was Lisa Grant. She had served under him for 6 years, and finding him alive was the best thing that had happened to her in weeks. "Admiral Price, sir," she said. "Sergeant Grant, extraction team. We are here to bring you home." Daniel looked at her, and for a moment she saw how tired he was. 3 weeks of captivity had taken their toll. But beneath the exhaustion, his eyes still burned with determination. "The prisoners," Daniel said. "All of them. They come with us. Already being handled, sir. Medical teams are on the way." Daniel nodded. He looked down at Velfax, who was still writhing on the floor. "You made a mistake, Commander," Daniel said quietly. "You saw a species that looked weak and assumed we were prey. But humans are not prey. We are the species that hunted every predator on our world until we were the only ones left. We are the species that refused to stay on one planet when an entire universe was waiting. We are the species that will burn down empires to save a single friend." He dropped the weapon on the floor next to Velfax. "Remember that. Tell your leaders. Make sure they understand." More Marines poured into the room, beginning the work of freeing prisoners and securing the ship. Daniel watched them for a moment, then turned to Sergeant Grant. "Take me to the bridge," he said. "I need to speak with my fleet." "Sir, you should see a doctor first. You have been through a lot." Daniel shook his head. "The doctors can wait. Right now, there is work to do. The Dominion will respond to this. We need to be ready." Sergeant Grant did not argue. She had learned long ago that when Admiral Price made a decision, the best thing to do was follow his lead. Together, they walked toward the communications center, leaving behind the broken commander and the wreckage of his plans. The rescue was almost complete. But Daniel knew that this was only the beginning of something much larger. War was coming, and humanity would be ready. The Valkyrie had always believed they were great warriors. Their empire had conquered dozens of worlds. Their soldiers had crushed countless enemies. They thought no species could match them in battle. Then they met the human Marines. The fighting spread through every corridor of the prison transport. Valkyrie guards tried to hold their positions, firing their energy weapons at the invaders. But the humans kept coming. Their armor absorbed the energy blasts. Their rifles fired solid projectiles that punched through Valkyrie shells like paper. And their fury was something the aliens had never faced before. Sergeant Grant led her team through the lower decks, clearing room after room. She had been a Marine for 12 years. She had fought in 3 major battles and dozens of smaller engagements. But nothing had prepared her for what she found on this ship. The prisoner cells were terrible. Aliens of many species sat in tiny cages, barely large enough to lie down. Many were injured. Some were sick. A few had clearly died and been left to rot in their cells. The smell was almost unbearable. "Get medical teams to Deck 7. Grant spoke into her radio. "We have a lot of wounded here. Some of them might not make it." "Understood, Sergeant. Teams are on the way." Grant continued forward, her rifle ready. A squad moved with her, covering all angles. They had trained for years for moments like this. Every movement was practiced, every action planned. A door opened ahead of them. 3 Valkyrie guards stepped out, weapons raised. Grant did not hesitate. She fired twice, and 2 of the guards fell. One of her squad members took down the third before he could pull his trigger. "Clear," she called out. Moving forward. Behind her, other Marines were opening prisoner cells and leading the captives to safety. The aliens looked at the humans with a mixture of fear and hope. They did not know who these soldiers were or why they had come, but they were grateful to be freed. One prisoner, a small creature with blue fur and large sad eyes, grabbed Grant's arm as she passed. "Why?" the creature asked in broken common, the trade language of the galaxy. "Why do you help us?" "You do not know us." Grant paused for a moment. It was a good question. The honest answer was complicated, but she gave the simple version. "Because it is the right thing to do," she said, "and because no one deserves to be a slave." The creature stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There were tears in its large eyes. Grant moved on. There were more enemies to fight, more prisoners to rescue. On the bridge of the prison transport, Daniel had arrived with an escort of Marines. The Valkyrie crew had already surrendered. They sat against one wall with their hands on their heads, watched by armed humans who looked like they were hoping someone would give them an excuse to shoot. Daniel walked to the main communication console and began entering commands. His hands moved quickly, despite the exhaustion that pulled at every part of his body. The console was different from human designs, but the basic principles were the same. "This is Admiral Daniel Price of the United Earth Defense Force," he said, his voice being broadcast on all frequencies. "To all Valkyrie ships in this sector, the prison transport has been captured. Your crew has surrendered. Any attempt to reclaim this vessel will be met with overwhelming force." He paused, then continued. "To the prisoners of this ship, you are now under the protection of humanity. Medical teams are treating your wounded. Transport ships will take you wherever you wish to go. You are free." Finally, he switched to the human military frequency. "Constellation, this is Admiral Price. Status report." Captain Cole's voice came through immediately. "Admiral, it is good to hear your voice. The transport is secured. We have 3 enemy cruisers approaching from the direction of Velkar Prime. They will arrive in approximately 20 minutes. 3 cruisers against our battle group. They either do not understand what they are facing, or they are simply responding with whatever ships were closest. Probably the second, sir. Our intelligence suggests the Valkyrie did not expect any serious human military presence in this region." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. They expected a lot of things that did not turn out to be true. "What is the status of the rescued prisoners?" "Over 300 confirmed alive, sir. About 40 in critical condition. Our medical staff is doing everything they can." "Good. Begin transferring the prisoners to our support ships. I want them away from any potential combat zone." "Understood, Admiral." "And, sir, welcome back." "Thank you, Captain." Thank you, Captain." "It is good to be back." Daniel ended the communication and turned to look at the captured Valkyrie crew. They watched him with their compound eyes, fear obvious in every movement they made. "You will be taken prisoner," Daniel told them. "You will be treated according to the rules of war. You will not be tortured. You will not be starved. You will not be used as slaves." He let those words sink in. This is how civilized species treat their enemies. Remember it. One of the Valkyrie officers spoke up, his voice shaking. The Dominion will come for you. They will destroy your fleet and your planet. You cannot win against us. Daniel walked over to the officer and looked down at him. Your Dominion has been conquering weak species for centuries. You have never faced an enemy that truly fights back. You thought humans were just another weak species to be conquered. He leaned closer. You were wrong, and your leaders will soon discover exactly how wrong they were. Sergeant Grant entered the bridge and approached Daniel. Admiral, all decks are secured. Prisoner evacuation is ahead of schedule. The medical teams report that they can save most of the critical cases. Casualties? 6 Marines wounded, none seriously. No deaths on our side. Grant paused. Valkyrie losses are significant. They fought hard, sir. Just not hard enough. Daniel nodded. He had hoped there would be no human deaths, but he knew that hope was often not enough. 6 wounded was better than he had expected. The enemy cruisers will be here soon, he said. Make sure all non-essential personnel are off this transport and back on our ships. I want us ready to fight the moment they arrive. Yes, sir. Grant began giving orders to her team. Around her, Marines moved with efficient purpose, completing their mission and preparing for the next phase of the battle. Daniel walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Valkyrie cruisers were racing toward them. Their crews certain that they would crush these upstart humans and reclaim their prize. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The constellation hung in space like a great black predator, its weapons ready, its crew eager for battle. Around it, the other ships of the human fleet took their positions. They had come to rescue their admiral. They had succeeded. Now they would show the Valkyrie the true price of threatening humanity. Daniel touched the viewport with one hand, feeling the cold of space through the glass. Come and find out what humans can do, he whispered. We have been waiting a long time to show you. In the distance, 3 bright points of light appeared. The enemy had arrived. The real battle was about to begin. The 3 Valkyrie cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel, with their weapons already charging. Their commanders had received word of the attack on the prison transport and had rushed to respond. They expected to find perhaps 1 or 2 small human ships engaged in a desperate rescue. What they found instead was a nightmare. The human fleet spread across their viewing. Screens like a wall of black metal and glowing weapons. At the center sat the constellation, its 12-kilometer hull making their own cruisers look like toys. Around it moved cruisers and frigates and destroyers, all with their guns pointed at the new arrivals. The lead Valkyrie commander, an old veteran named HFY, stared at the screen in disbelief. This was impossible. Human ships were supposed to be primitive. Their weapons were supposed to be weak. Everything he had been told about this species was proving to be lies. What are your orders, Commander? His first officer asked. HFY did not answer immediately. He was trying to calculate the odds of survival. 3 cruisers against this fleet. The math was simple and terrible. Send a message to High Command, he said finally. Tell them what we are facing. Tell them the humans are not what we believed. And then? HFY looked at his crew. They were good soldiers who had served him well. They did not deserve to die because someone had made a terrible miscalculation. And then we try to survive. On the bridge of the constellation, Captain Cole watched the enemy ships with calm interest. They had stopped moving forward. They were just sitting there, probably trying to figure out what to do. They looked confused, his tactical officer observed. They expected easy prey, Cole replied. Instead, they found us. I would be confused too. The communications officer spoke up. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the lead enemy cruiser. They are asking if we will accept their surrender. Cole raised an eyebrow. That was faster than he had expected. He turned to Admiral Price, who had just arrived on the bridge from the captured transport. "Admiral, your orders?" Daniel walked to the center of the bridge and looked at the enemy ships on the main screen. He had been a prisoner of the Valkyrie for 3 weeks. He had seen what they did to the species they conquered. Part of him wanted to destroy those cruisers and everyone on them, but that was not who he was. That was not who humans were supposed to be. "Accept their surrender," he said. "Have them power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. They will be taken prisoner and treated according to the rules of war. And if they do not surrender..." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Then we destroy them. Quickly and completely. But we give them the choice first. That is what separates us from them." The message was sent. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The Valkyrie cruisers sat in space, their commanders debating what to do. Then, one by one, their weapons powered down. Their engines went quiet. They had chosen survival over destruction. Captain Cole let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. "All ships, hold fire. Prepare boarding parties for the surrendered vessels." As the human fleet moved to secure their new prisoners, Daniel gave another order. "Open a channel to all Valkyrie frequencies. I want this message heard throughout their space." "Channel open." "Admiral." Daniel stood straight and spoke with a voice that carried the weight of everything he had experienced in the past 3 weeks. "This message is for the leaders of the Valkyrie Dominion. My name is Admiral Daniel Price of the United Earth Defense Force. 3 weeks ago, your people captured me. They thought this would show the galaxy that humans are weak. They were wrong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Today, a single human battle group destroyed or captured every Valkyrie ship in this sector. We rescued over 300 prisoners from your slave transport. We did this not because we wanted war, but because we will not allow innocent beings to suffer when we have the power to help them." His voice grew harder. "Let this be a warning to you. Humanity does not seek conflict with the Dominion. We want peace. We want trade. We want to be good neighbors in this galaxy. But we will not accept slavery. We will not accept cruelty. And we will not abandon our people when they are taken from us." He looked directly at the camera, recording his words. "If you come at us with weapons, we will respond with weapons of our own. And as your commanders learned today, we are not the primitive species you believed us to be. We have hidden our true strength for years, waiting to see if peace was possible. You have shown us that it may not be." He let that threat hang in the air for a moment. "The choice is now yours. You can accept humanity as equals and work toward a future where all species can live in freedom. Or you can continue your path of conquest and slavery and discover just how far we are willing to go to stop you." He gave a signal and the transmission ended. For a long moment the bridge was silent. Then Sergeant Grant spoke from where she stood near the door. "Sir, that message will spread across the entire Dominion within hours. The High Command will have to respond." "I know," Daniel said. "That is the point. I want them to understand what they are dealing with. I want them to know that they have a choice. And if they choose war..." Daniel turned to look at her. Despite everything he had been through, despite the exhaustion that pulled at his body, there was steel in his gray eyes. "Then we give them a war they will never forget." Captain Cole cleared his throat. "Admiral, there is something you should see." He pointed at the main screen, which now showed a view of space around the fleet. Daniel looked and felt something warm spread through his chest. The rescued prisoners had been transferred to human support ships. Now those ships were moving past the constellation, heading towards safety. And as each ship passed, it turned on its external lights in a specific pattern. It was a signal that had been used since the earliest days of human space travel. It meant thank you. 300 beings from dozens of different worlds, all of them grateful to be free. All of them saved by humans who had risked their lives for complete strangers. "We did good today," Daniel said quietly. "Yes, sir," Cole agreed. "We did." Daniel watched the lights flashing in the darkness of space. Each one represented a life that would continue, a person who would go home to their family, a being who would remember that when everything seemed lost, help had come from an unexpected place. This was why he fought. Not for glory or power or conquest, but for moments like this, when the darkness was pushed back a little and hope was allowed to survive. The Valkyrie, Dominion, would respond to his message eventually. They would probably choose war. And when they did, humanity would be waiting. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, Daniel Price allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in 3 weeks. He felt proud. The guns of the constellation went quiet. The battle was over. The rescued were safe. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the leaders of a great empire were learning that the universe was not quite what they thought it was. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel turned away from the screen and headed toward the medical bay. He had wounds that needed treatment and rest that was long overdue. But as he walked through the corridors of the great ship, surrounded by the crew that had come to save him, he smiled. It was good to be home.